All right, but I should give you some more scary stories or something, because I did have a couple at least ghostly-ish tales, and so I feel like I should at least bring them up. And even though I could do. The problem is I could do this conversation all day, and then we would never get to them. But I got a couple for you, right?
Great.
So now the first one, the question you might have is, hey, should you even talk about ghost stories, right? Like, well, I don't have. There's no Bible answer. There's nowhere it says it's thou shalt not ghost story. Okay, but we should stay away from superstition. So I do agree with Titus in that. But Charles Spurgeon in The Sword and the Trowel put out an episode. He put out a magazine article on Christmas Eve and was basically like, hey, everyone loves a good ghost story once in a while. It's Christmas Eve, and let's have a ghost story. And to me, I think Christmas Eve is out of time for ghost stories. But I guess before Halloween was big, you did ghost stories on Christmas Eve. That's probably why the Christmas Carol has all those ghost stories. Okay, let's do it. And this is one of the ghost stories he published. He had a few. Most of them were kind of goofy. One of them was super fake, where like the whole town thought a ghost was in town, but it was actually just somebody's horse had gotten loose or something like that. And so they eventually realized the thing running through the graveyard was just a horse. And they were like, but wait, who's been ringing the bell? And it was like actually a guy traveling through town had just heard everyone else panicking. So he started ringing the bell. But there was one story that he had. It was basically an old minister had traveling around England, had to go long distances by horseback. And he was an old kind of your classic traveling, maybe probably a Methodist, now that I think about it, traveling preacher. And this guy said he was traveling down the road one day on his horse, and he noticed up ahead there was a man trying to be sneaky crossing a field, and he could see, but the guy that he could see didn't realize that he could see him as well. And he looked at him and he said, oh snap, that is I recognize him. He's this reaper. He's a traveling guy that I met yesterday. He was not super friendly, but he did get a good look at me. And he said he realized he was wearing like a nice watch that he'd had handed down to him from his great grandpa. And he said, okay, I see him he's hiding through the woods. He's actually walking with his reaper stick. I think he's about to attack me. He very well might kill me, and he's probably coming for my watch. Now, for me, I hear that story and I go, turn around, right? Like, don't keep driving down the road. But he said, I know that if I turn back, I'm expected for a ministry appointment. I need to preach somewhere, and I don't have time to turn any other direction. I won't be able to make it. I'm already, it's already going to be close. So he said, I am just going to keep riding, and I'm going to trust that God is going to get me through this. And I would just say, turn around, miss the appointment. The guy's going to murder you. He just said he kept riding and he kept getting closer. And this guy was, very clearly on the way, getting closer on the road, looking like he was about to get him. And he didn't know what to do. And he's just praying, God, what, am I about to get killed by this guy? What is about to happen? When he said out of nowhere, he heard the sound of another horse. Another rider was now suddenly on the path with him. And he didn't even know where he came from. He said that was kind of amazing because you're way out in the middle of nowhere, and he hadn't heard this guy the entire time. He was like, oh God, this could be my miracle sin. And this rider basically dressed up in I don't remember. I think he said basically all black. He couldn't even really see his face. It was kind of shaded, just pulls up next to him and is riding fast beside him. And he goes, oh, thank goodness you're here. There's actually a guy up ahead. And this rider just says nothing. And he's like, well, thank you. Let's ride together. And the rider just sticks with them. So they ride through. This reaper guy sees now that there's two of them, and he can kind of see him backing away. There must have been some elevation or something. I don't know how he could see all this, but he sees the guy backs off, and they were going through this kind of shrubbery area where the guy was probably going to jump them. And as they pass through it, everything's safe. And he goes, oh, thank goodness. You are a blessing sent by God. This guy, I'm pretty sure I was about to be attacked, and I think God sent you to save me. And he says, the writer just says to him, in this very clear voice, you said it yourself. And then he turned around like, oh, you actually speak. And the writer was gone. And he's like, wait, whoa, what just happened? Where did he go? He gets to his appointment. He preaches. That's the end of the story. I was like, that's a pretty cool story. I like that story. And I like that it's got the Charles Spurgeon endorsement. Now, I have to imagine that sounds like an angel, personally speaking, not a ghost. But he put it under his ghost stories because what else do you label it? But I thought that was a pretty cool one.
But under the cloak, he's got the revolving eyes, and we know what real angels look like. So yes, yeah.
Now, of course, he does sound more like a Nazgul, from Lord of the Rings, based all black, riding beside. But let's just go with it.
Well, even God used the destroyer to do His will, and as Martin Luther said, even the devil is God's devil. So yes,
true.
And another episode to be done by people far wiser than I is the effects of the Enlightenment, and how, especially for us in the West, in modern day with technology and extreme skepticism, we discount these types of stories. We discount missionaries who bring back tales of being surrounded by people wishing to kill them, and then their camp goes unattacked for the night, and they interact with the tribes people later, and they say, well, why didn't you attack? It's like, well, you guys were surrounded by a giant army. We couldn't do anything against it. We wanted to kill you. And like, there was no army there. It was just us. And so you listen to these stories, and it should be extreme skepticism. This didn't happen. This didn't really happen. All these people throughout history are just ecstatic people who believe in the supernatural, cover story. We can't honestly believe this. But again, when you're then talking about string theory and 222 dimensions, and the universe winking into existence,
multiverses and all this, it's amazing to me that you can say with a straight face, wow, you believe in angels, and something that pretty much every culture has acknowledged. That's ridiculous. Anyway, you were once a fish, and then you became a horse, and then you became a human. But some of the horses went into the ocean and they swam now, and they're called whales. I'm like, wait, how is that any less just pure hypothesis than the idea that there are other beings out there, such as angels, that we can't fully account for? Now, it's funny you say that, though, because Elise, who runs Martyrs and Missionaries, she always will read, my wife here, she'll always read the full autobiography of a person. And she struggles with, how much do I include that kind of thing? Because I don't want people to just kind of be like, okay, this show just takes any old crazy stuff in here and puts it in there. But at the same time, there are moments, I think I really think it was Darlene Rose, where she said Darlene Rose was basically going to be under attack by these people, but they didn't end up attacking her. And later on, she met with those guys. She knew they wanted to kill her. And she was kind of like, why didn't you guys attack us? You had us wide open. And they're like, what are you talking about? You had these big armed men outside your house all night long. Like, there was never a chance to even go in there. And she was like, there were no men in that house. We were by ourselves. We thought we were going to die. What do you do? Do you include that story? And people go, oh, that can't happen. But it did happen. It is the only witnesses that were there say it happened. So what are we supposed to do? Believe only what the modern skeptics tell us to believe, when they themselves don't even, will turn around and start talking about Bigfoot or aliens almost just as fast, right? Like, it's almost the most atheistic people I know are almost always the most biggest alien believers I know too. So, okay, what is it we're allowed to actually believe in here?
Yes, exactly.
But anyway, no, it is a really important thing. And it's like you said, out in the field, when you interact, you will see and hear stuff like this. A long time ago, I heard a story about a guy who said he went to visit a witch doctor, and this witch doctor was just not having it, wasn't believing in anything he said. But then the next day, this witch doctor suddenly was way more open and friendly to him. And he was like, what happened? What changed? He said, well, last night I had a dream where I kept trying to summon the demonic spirits, but for some reason you kept showing up, and this is his word, so you bear with me. You kept peeing on all of the stuff I was doing and causing the demons not to show up in my dream. And I really was trying to get rid of you, but I couldn't get rid of you. And I realized I need to go find out about your God. What? Like, okay, that's a weird story, but it worked. The witch doctor came to Christ and everything was good. So wait, what are you going to do? The guy had a weird dream the night before. Come on, man. Like, everything can be naturalistic. Sometimes God is just moving, and we need to embrace that those things are great and good. Which, by the way, that witch doctor story reminds me of my next story I have for you. If you're ready for a weird one. Well,
I was just going to say that, you came out with a Boniface shirt before. The symbol of the tree chopped down. I'm just saying, you could use this one and use the P and Calvin thing on.
There we go. I like it.
Yes.
Our number ones.
Yeah.
I was going to say, the Boniface shirt is our number one selling shirt. By the way, it's still, like, especially come wintertime, people will go looking for a sweater, and something about Boniface Logging Company, people immediately start buying it, which I love. But okay, so when this story is just weird, and I have not done the proper research on this. The story was given to me by Ben Garrett from the Haunted Cosmos, and he had this story originally, so it's not my story. So if there's anything wrong, I'm putting it all on that guy.
Totally.
No blame, but pass that blame away. But he told me there was a story in the ancient church, like way back when, and that there was this beautiful woman that everyone wanted to marry. She was a wealthy, aristocratic woman. She was a Christian. She said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to marry anybody unless I'm a Christian. And this guy really wanted to marry her, but he knew that she wouldn't marry him unless she was a Christian. So he went to like the local necromancer kind of whatever, pagan guy who was in
As you
town
do,
too. And
yeah.
he said, hey, can you get this girl? I really want this girl. Is there anything we can do? And he goes, no problem. You want a love potion? I can do a love potion. And he's like, is that a thing? He's like, it's not like a potion. I can do a love spell on her house tonight and then she'll love you by tomorrow. Okay, I got you. And, all right, sure. Well, let's do that. If you can make her fall in love with me, that's all I want, really, right? So the guy goes, the witch doctor or whatever, not what do you call a Greek version of a witch doctor? The necromancer, sorcerer, I don't know, whatever. He goes to he goes to her house that night and does his witchcrafty stuff. And this, again, I'm telling you an ancient story. So the story goes that she woke up in the middle of the night and she had no idea any of the sorcery stuff was happening, but she was just having a very strong, like feverish dreams about this man that had asked to marry her. She said no to. And she just felt like she was being, having her heart tickled by him. And she just kept praying, God, I don't know what's going on. It's a weird night. Maybe it's the same bad burrito that those other people ate, right? But Lord, take this away from me. You told me I should only marry a Christian man. I said no to this guy. So I don't know where these feelings are coming from. And that this kind of battling went on all night long for her, where she just kept going back to God and saying, God, I don't know where this comes from. Please take this away from me. Eventually, it finally kind of calms down. She goes to bed and goes to sleep. The next day, she kind of comes out of her house, la-di-da, didn't sleep well, whatever. And the sorcerer is there. And he's just like, I need to know about your God. And she's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I spent all night doing spells and trying to summon all my demons to go in there. And they would go in there for like a split second and I would see them run out. They wouldn't have any business there. What is it you have that I need to know about? Because nothing I did worked. Okay, is that story true? It's probably a bit fabulous, but we do actually know, historically speaking, that these people did exist. And I can't remember their names right off the top of my head, but there is historically that famous sorcerer did become a Christian. So, I don't know, right? It's a weird one, but it's one of those 1800-year-old stories. So of course it's going to be a little bit weird. It starts with a love spell. Of course it's going to be weird, right? But hey, it's a pretty cool story of the power of Christ over the supernatural world and what he can do against demons, if it's true. And it's definitely one of those stories that I put a giant if it's true. Now, some of those stories, when you have those if it's true kind of stories too, it's a story that's actually hiding a probably real story within it. So something like this probably occurred, even if it didn't occur exactly as the story does. And I have a really good one of those for you as well that awesome. I just remembered.
Awesome.
It's from the same time period. It's a little bit newer, and it involves the Christmas spirit. Going back to Spurgeon, right? Saint Nicholas, who is well famous for becoming Santa Claus today. But the original St. Nicholas was a real person. He did give to the poor, and he was a very generous, kind man. And the original St. Nicholas died a normal death. But in the Catholic Church at that time, they had to make them do miracles for them to be considered saints.
Yeah.
And so they have two miracles associated with St. Nicholas, and they are both ridiculous. But I think one of them is just stupid. The one of them is actually probably based on a true story. And I actually think the true story is cooler than the made up story. Well, let's go ahead and do the two of them. The first that's utterly ridiculous is after he died, he oozed green blood, which people used to wipe themselves and cure themselves of diseases. I'm not wanting to question a miracle, but if you are burying somebody and they start oozing green blood, that's an alien or something, and you need to put that in the ground fast.
Yeah, Vulcan or miracle, either one. Yes.
Set it on fire. I don't wipe yourself with it because I don't think what happens next is normally good. So I don't want to question the miracles by the Catholic Church, but I don't fully believe in that one. And the second one is utterly ridiculous, but it's actually probably based on a somewhat true story. And I like the true story better than the ridiculous version. It goes like this. St. Nicholas was traveling somewhere and he goes into a town. He goes into this like tavern / butcher place and he eats a meal. It's a great meal, great food. But in the middle of the meal, this kid comes running out from the basement. He looks haggard. He looks rough. He looks horrifying. And the kid's like, this guy is killing kids in the basement. And they all run downstairs. And oh my goodness, in the basement, there are children that have been executed and chopped up. And the butcher is doing this to them. And it's terrible. And hopefully you don't have a lot of kids listening to this show because this got really dark. Santa Claus just took a dark road. But But St. Nicholas prays over the children, these body parts everywhere, and they all come back together and the children get up and they're alive and they arrest the butcher and everything's great. And that's his other miracle associated with him. And I'm not saying I doubt it, but I've got some questions before you're going to sell me on that story. And it's completely, utterly, obviously just that's not how anything works.
I mean,
but what's crazy is it's actually
what was the butcher selling then?
Yeah. What did Santa eat beforehand? Like, there's a lot of deep, dark questions here into this story that I don't think we want to know the answer to. I leave out cookies for Santa. What am I supposed to be leaving out for him?
That's right.
But but with the actual story was probably like this. Nicholas was traveling through a town when three men were accused of murder of doing a murder. And these three men were about to be executed when Nicholas, risking his own life, not with miraculous green blood or superpowers, basically runs up on the execution stand and goes, "Hold up. What is the evidence these guys actually did the murder?" And the judge, kind of recognizing Nicholas as an important person, knows him a little bit, goes, "Well, this one guy over here was their business partner and said they did it." He goes, "So you're going to kill these three men based on the word of one man? Have you done any investigation? Have you done any double checking?" And they're kind of like, "Well, no." "Have you even found a body, that they supposedly have murdered?" And they're like, "Well, no, we haven't." And he goes, "Well, why don't you do those things first before you kill these guys?" And they began doing the investigation. And the next day, the fourth guy, the business partner that had ratted them out, comes to St. Nicholas and he goes, "I feel terrible. Thank you so much for stopping me. I was lying. We were having a business deal go bad, and I thought I could just get rid of them by accusing them of murder. But I couldn't live with myself if I had done that. You just kept me from doing like the worst thing I could possibly do." The three men were let out, and all is well that ends well. So in a way, like, yeah, St. Nicholas did probably save three lives. But the real story is, in my opinion, actually more heroic than the weird children coming back to life version of the story. That is actually the one that got enshrined into his miracle Hall of Fame there. So I wonder if the same with the necromancer or sorcerer thing, if there was maybe a grain of something there that became its own wild tale, or maybe it happened as it is. I don't know.
I just feel like the more that I hear about St. Nicholas, the more that I think his mythology is undersold by all the things, things, punching Arius for heresy, necromancy, and then Detective Santa Claus or Lawyer Santa Claus. Yeah. I mean, that Santa S. Claus Esquire is pretty awesome.
We're supposed to not believe that the Arius thing happened. The history of that came later, and sometimes I just look at a story and go, "It's so good as is, but don't give me the facts." I will tell you that this is probably a made-up story, I did, but I'm also going to tell you I like that version, and the original Santa Claus version is actually even more amazing because he slaps Arius across the face, goes to jail. And then he prays, "God, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have slapped him in the face. I don't want to accidentally engender sympathy for the cause of the Arians. I got out of the line, God. They were talking smack about you, Lord. And you know how I get upset when that happens." And then they had declothed him. They had derobed him. He wasn't naked, but they didn't have any of his priestly garb on, basically. Well, when he looked up after praying, all of it was sitting there. So he put it on. The jailers came by, saw him in his garb. They went and got the guards. And they basically were like, "Should we let him in?" And they said, "Well, he's already in his garb and no one gave it to him but God." And they're like, "Well, if God wants him in, we got to let him in." Now, did that probably happen? Probably not. But boy, it's a great story. I really like that version of it. It's kind of cool, right? Really, really, really redemptive of it. But I agree with you. I think the mythos of St. Nicholas the Man is actually a lot better than the flying reindeer fat guy that he ended up becoming.
Yes, come on, horror people! You're mythologizing and making horror out of the wrong part of the awesomeness of Santa Claus. So, I mean,
well, now wait, I could give you one more. I could give you one more. I got one more taste for you. All right.
I mean, yes, absolutely.
Because we're talking about last one, and we're talking about ghost old stories. I feel like you have to mention another important one, which was John Wesley grew up in a straight up haunted house. He had a house as a kid that was truly haunted by a ghost. It would seem he was there for a couple years, and this house, and I'm blanking on his name. I'm so sorry, everybody. I didn't do the research. I should. It was they had a name for him. It was like Old Thomas or Old something or another. And this thing would just bump around at night. It would just make sounds, open doors, and everyone in the house knew there was a ghost there, and it was well known. And in fact, apparently it was so well known. But for some reason, the father over the house was almost like stubborn about it. Like, not as in like, I don't believe there's a ghost here, but as in like, I know there's a ghost here, but I'm not going to let some ghost, bother me. If there's a ghost here, he's gonna have to work really hard to get me to move out of this house because I'm staying put, which is, in my opinion, kind of a cooler version of stubborn, but also very much this is why horror movies get made, because people like that exist, and then they end up causing all the problems, right? Because they're the people who refuse to acknowledge what it is. Now, I know a lot of people are probably listening going, hey, I don't really believe in ghosts because I think after we die, we either go to heaven and hell. So that's probably demonic. I'm with you. I hear you. I don't also believe in ghosts, that our souls don't go to be with God, but that just makes the story all the more troublesome with the fact that he clearly grew up with a haunted house. And maybe some super Calvinists are like, and that's where he got it from. No. Come on, John Wesley. We like him. He's a good guy. But no, it's kind of just a crazy thing. So here's this famous, very impactful person, helped lead the Great Awakening. Yet him and his brother Charles also would have been in the same house. Writes all these hymns later on, but they both grew up with a ghost in their house that just for years was causing them problems and moving stuff around and just basically being a pest. What do you do? Do you tell them they were wrong and the old ghost didn't live and you weren't there and they both claim it did? What are you going to do? It's just one of those weird things. I felt like if I wouldn't have been doing us justice if I didn't bring an actual ghost story into spooky, scary time from church history.
With Wesley's, I hear a story and I'm sympathetic, and then I hear another story and I remove all sympathy. But the old Jeffrey should not be.
Thank you, old Jeffrey. I was sitting here like, I know it's not old Thomas, but I know it's old something.
I've never heard that out of again. These are the stories that make the men. It's not just these moments. Patton is not just a general that drives tanks. He's a person who believes that he's a reincarnated Roman general, and that adds to his mania. And so these people have more than their myth about them, or these moments. On one of our church history trivia games, the fact that the police were told to be on the lookout for people fleecing Spurgeon because he would just give anybody money, no matter what their story was a weird fact to learn about him, but it was so endearing of the man even more. So
yeah, it was the old beggar's handbook, had him at the top of it, basically. Like, if you're a beggar, here's the book they would use, and they would give it to you to teach you how to be a beggar. Which, how bad was the begging situation that there was a publishing industry? I don't know.
At least, but
on the top of it was, if you see Charles Spurgeon, put your hand out, like, ask him, because he's a sucker. He'll always give you money. And I'm like, I don't think there's a better testimony to Charles Spurgeon that you could possibly find, a better ringing endorsement of him than the beggar saying you can always count on Charles, because that means thousands of times when no one was looking, Spurgeon's like, oh, I come on, here's some money. I can't not give you some money. You guys need help. I'm here for you. And that tells you more about his character and who he was than 1,000 other things could possibly do. There's a story of Robert, is it Robert Murray McChain? It's actually not. I think it's actually either Andrew Bernard or Horatius Bernard. I don't know. Anyway, but they went to Israel, and they were they went, and they were like one of the first European people to really go to Israel and visit the sites. Back when we think of Jerusalem now, it's very different than it was then. It was basically a trash heap, and it was actually heartbreaking because it was just in such disrepair. But there was another traveler there who wrote down about how he had heard a preacher just going to town, basically being like, this is the place Jesus lived. This is the place Jesus died. Like, do you understand how important this moment in history is? And he was like in a tavern on top of the table, to shout, like just telling everyone, not drunk or anything, just telling everyone, like, do you realize where you're standing? This is where the real God of this earth once was. And he said the entire, all these travelers and all these people were just enraptured by him speaking. He wasn't doing this for fame. He was just moved by the moment. And turned out later on, people were able to connect it and realize this was this famous preacher, Andrew Bernard, before he had become famous. That was the guy who was doing it. And everyone was like, wow, like, again, this is somebody else getting this testimony moment, proving that that guy you see and you read about is actually who he was.
That's great. So, yeah. So the challenge then for us is we're probably not going to be the Spurgeons, the Cappadocian Fathers. We're not going to be old Saint Nick, but it's one of the things that I think we oversell and then we undersell it in Sunday school, where we talk about adoption into God's family, and there's that's just like, oh, now we're all God's children, and He loves you, but the very fact that we can call Jesus Christ our brother, the firstborn of creation, and that we are sons and daughters of the living God. And then not only on top of that, but then He uses us, like in church history, to be the conduit, as how I usually refer to it. We're the wire that connects the unbeliever to soon be a believer to God, and the message passes through us. And so God uses us as messengers. And the Ephesians 2:8-9 is great, but I always have to include 10 every time I talk about it, because we are saved for what? For good works. And so within your family, sharing these stories of how your family started, of the weird stories that kind of bring those families together. It's either going to be the heartbreak ones, it's going to be the melancholy ones that are funny after the fact. And so we think about the quotes of orthodoxy, of people that talk about why are these hedges put here, and we are supposed to go out and find it. Well, there's something to be said about adding to those hedges as well. And so I hope modern day Christians realize that they do have a place in history. It might not be those grandiose ones that you're going to read in books, but the effects that are going to be felt in your own children, in your own family, there should be stories worth telling. And a part of the message within those moments of, banality should be ones that are couched in the Christian worldview, because that's the one that affects other people around you. It's the ones that will get people to say, why is that person living differently than the people around me? And I do believe in being that annoying Christian that preaches the gospel to people, but also there is something to be said about the allowing your life to cause people to be so kind of enamored with how weird you are that they have to ask about it, especially in our hands-off culture. So I hope these kind of stories is one of my ideas, is one of the reasons why I had Jeff on to talk about schooling and fathers being investing, is because when I look at church history, when I look at, combining the Old Testament and the New Testament, and how much Old Testament is in New Testament, we can't lose that strand, because it seems like God is through the entirety of history. It doesn't just end in 70 AD, or the destruction of Jerusalem, or it just doesn't cut off at Revelation 20:23. That history is still happening. It's still important. And even though you aren't El Cid or Vlad the Impaler or General Patton or, heaven forbid, a president someday, that we can still add to God's story. And we have that privilege to be part of God's story. and being called sons and daughters of the living God. It's one thing that it's not just something we should tell our kids, but it's something that we should live and understand the responsibility to that. So there's my little sermon to generationally being concerned with history. And history is just cool because Troy has given us so many great stories there that have done so. And also we can go back through the archives of, I mean, if you could put a number on it, how many sermons have you done or think you've done or mentioned in some fashion?
Well, I mean, it's well over 200 sermons, 200 and maybe 30. Perhaps we do some episodes called Revived Conversations where we talk about history,
Yeah.
so that's a little unclear, but I think I can pretty safely put in the 220, 30 range is where we're at. And we actually just did something, a bit of an update on our website. Now, if you go to revivedthoughts.com, you will find a section called Map. And if you click on Map, there is a list of every episode we've ever done and every person we've ever encountered. And you can just see, there's people all over the world here. I can listen to martyrs and missionaries about New Zealand or India or a Revived Thought sermon from a guy preaching in China, and you can get it all. So yeah, there's hundreds and hundreds of episodes at this point. I don't want to I'm just not trying to any kind of a braggadocious way or anything like that. So I do think we are one of the only databases like this, just collecting history truly from all over the world and putting it all in one location. And so I do really believe in what we're doing because I have seen the impact it has. Young people who learning about their faith grew deeper in God, older people who are, lonelier, but enjoying hearing these stories as refreshment that they hadn't heard when they were younger, pastors listening to stories and incorporating them now into their sermons, and mothers listening to these stories with their van full of cars and van full of cars, van full of kids and cars. Maybe there's some little Hot Wheels in there too.
Of course.
And then the kids are, then we're hearing like, hey, my kid's been listening to your show and now they want to be a missionary. Maybe it's amazing the impact that this history is having on people. So I fully believe it. I think God uses it. I absolutely think that scripture is what everyone needs to listen to, and that theology is extremely important. But I think an important piece we're all missing in our Christian walks is church history. It's kind of like apologetics. It's this kind of out there branch people forget about, but when you know it well, it does so much for your walk with God.
Yeah. There's no office of apologist, as we like to say on the show, and there's no office of church historian as well. So we are in church history still, and so we're always waiting for it. Yeah. When I heard the concept of your show, I was like, wow, that is awesome. And so when I got asked to be on the first trivia, I was like, oh wow, I get to kind of rub elbows a little bit, and so I'll gladly be the heel in this one, and be the one at the end of Jeopardy where they have to give you $200 to go to your favorite charity because you're so far at the negative. So so I just appreciate that and appreciate what you do. Not just with the show, but in your mission. So Mission Quest is where you can go to support Troy and his family. As they're in the kind of Indonesia area as well. And so we are privileged to do that as well. My daughters, when during Awana, they had to pick a missionary. Troy and his family were the ones we got to study about and learn about all the different places that you keep hopping around to, and being privileged to pray for you as well. So thank you for doing that as well.
We appreciate that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. It's an honor to do it.
Awesome. Well, that's it for this one. So the next episode that you'll get to listen to is me again, sadly, I know. But Tony will come back and he'll save you from me. And I'll introduce our new book that we're going to be doing, our 11th book. That's going to be a little different, and it'll be scary for me. But as I always say, I'm kind of the foil for the audience. So if you think that I'm of lower quality, then you're in the better camp. And you can watch me pester Tony with questions more so on the book topic that we're going to be going over. So join us for that as we continue realizing that God still cares about our minds, and he still works in history. So Troy, again, thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time.